Good morning. Hello, my name is Chris Jones. I'm with the University of Arizona, Gila County Cooperative Extension. Welcome to today's edition of the Garden and Country Extension webinar. We've got Ashley Hall here. She's my colleague in the county. We're going to be talking about something called Yellow Bluestem. It's an encroaching invasive grass. So non-native grass that I think a lot of us need to get a little awareness about so we can see what the concern is about it. A little bit about these webinars. I do these weekly on Thursdays at 11. Keep them at under an hour with a presentation, a little Q&A time. We feature a variety of horticultural, natural resources topics relevant to the environmental conditions and residential concerns of Gila County, Arizona, and certainly anybody else who finds this of concern. Recordings for these webinars are posted at the Arizona Cooperative Extension YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and look up Arizona Cooperative Extension, Garden and Country, you'll find all these webinars, and hopefully we get this one up by Monday. And just a reminder that the University of Arizona is an equal opportunity affirmative action institution. So here's our agenda for today. Thank you for everybody who joined us during our kind of login and lag time. A little discussion that Ashley and I had getting started here. My name is Chris Jones. I'm your moderator. Our topic today is Yellow Bluestem, an encroaching invasive grass. Our speaker is Ashley Hall. She'll have about a half-hour PowerPoint slide show for us, and then we'll go into a question and answer discussion with Ashley. So as we're going, feel free to put questions into the chat box and we'll put those in there, and perhaps we'll even be able to promote you to ask the questions and just try to make it interactive that way. We'll seek to wrap up our discussion by noon and end the call. See you guys later. So here's our speaker, Ashley Hall. She is the Area Assistant Agent for Rangeland Management and Animal Science in Gila and Pinal County with the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. So at this point, Ashley, you can bring up your slides and we will listen intently.
Sorry. Okay, so as Chris mentioned, my name is Ashley Hall and I work with him in Gila County. Because I live in an area with pretty spotty internet, I'm going to turn my video off just during the presentation to kind of preserve bandwidth, if that's okay with everybody. And also just a quick warning, I told Chris, one of my dogs is just barking nonstop this morning, so I'm gonna apologize ahead of time. There may be some dog barking going on in the background, so just bear with me and I appreciate that. So just a little bit about the presentation. I'm going to quickly go over how to ID Yellow Bluestem, talk about some environmental impacts as far as soil health, biodiversity, give some feedback about what I found in Gila County in regards to Yellow Bluestem. If you're interested in control measures, things that have been found in research that will work to control Yellow Bluestem, how to identify Yellow Bluestem in comparison to our native species that look pretty similar. And then just because I can, I'm gonna talk a little bit about what you can do as far as getting involved in invasive species control if you're interested. So Yellow Bluestem was introduced in the mid-1920s to the Great Plains. It was originally brought here as they thought it would be a good grass for forage and to control erosion. Unfortunately, on the forage side, not a lot of wildlife or cattle really like to eat it. So you can kind of see here the overall distribution throughout the United States. And then if we kind of zoom in, it's pretty much concentrated, kind of around the Cottonwood Coconino area. There are some sightings on the Tonto National Forest here in Gila County. And then it's got a pretty good stronghold south of Tucson in some of those Sky Islands. And so it's pretty much found up to 4,000 feet, a lot of times in disturbed areas or old abandoned cultivated fields. It's taking over some of our high quality grasslands and pinyon juniper habitats, unfortunately. And so it is a perennial bunch grass. It grows about 4 feet tall on a good year. It can reproduce through rhizomes, which are just above ground stems, but the majority of the time it reproduces through seed, and it's a very prolific seed spreader, which is unfortunate since it's an invasive species. To ID it, the leaves, if you kind of look onto this picture on the right, the leaves are mostly basal, just meaning at the base of the plant, and they're longer towards the base of the plant. And then as you move your way up the stem, those leaves are going to become shorter. Looking at the inflorescence, or just that's the flower of a grass, it's a fan-shaped panicle, and a panicle, just you can kind of see, is just an open, branched arrangement of the seeds within that that panicle. So they're often going to have this purplish reddish tinge, which can kind of help ID the plant compared to some of our other natives that I'll get into later. And it tends to bloom in late June to early July, which is a lot earlier than our native bluestems and some of our other native grasses. Just a few other things to kind of help ID it. You can see it's got these really distinct parallel veins along the leaf blade, these swollen brownish red nodes, which is pretty spot on. You can even see this one kind of in the background. You want to look for these hairs at the ligule, and sorry, not to be too botanical, the ligule is just where this leaf is kind of opening at the stem. And then this right here is also kind of a sheath area, and you can see it's a little rounded. Again, you can look for these hairs. They don't always go up the leaf like this, but they do in some of the different variations of the species. And then another key factor is the awns, which are just these long hairs coming off of the seed. So why is this invasive species a concern to us? Research shows it's been documented to alter the mycorrhizal associations within the soil. And so why are those associations important? If you look at this picture, you can see the difference. So the mycorrhizae are basically just fungi that are mutually beneficial to the grass species that they have a relationship with. And they, as you can see in this picture, they really enhance the root system by increasing the root surface area, which in turn allows the species that they have this relationship with to increase their efficiency with uptaking nutrients and water, and just increases overall absorption. Another study that I found showed that yellow bluestem also has a competitive advantage against our native species because of allelopathic biochemicals that it's putting into the soil. And so allelopathy is basically just the release of a secondary compound that negatively affects neighboring plants. So researchers aren't really sure if it's directly or indirectly having a negative impact on vegetation, but they have found that it does support reduced germination in native seeds. So researchers are leaning more to the side that it's having a direct effect on our native species. Biodiversity is also a concern. So I found 3 different studies that show there's significantly lower bird abundance and species richness or diversity where there's a monoculture of yellow bluestem as opposed to native grass pastures. And it's also tied to significantly less anthropod biomass, which is the food that these birds are relying on in native pasture. So just looking at this chart right here, so native grasses, that's pretty obvious. The CRP, that's areas in Texas and Kansas and other Great Plains where they've tried to go back in and restore degraded rangelands. And so they've got a mix of both native and non-native species. And then the OWB, that's just, they're calling yellow bluestem old world bluestem. And so you can see there's a significant difference in richness and both abundance in both of these areas compared to the native grasslands and even compared to the native and non-native mix. And then here's just a figure showing those differences between the biomass of arthropods that birds are relying on for food And then another study also showed that there was just an overall decrease in abundance in rodents in the monoculture as well. Again, it's impacting native species biodiversity. So in areas with more yellow bluestem, there was a decrease in species richness and lower diversity on all species of vegetation. But then in areas where they looked at grass-only species, again, they found the same thing. This study also looked at something interesting. They kind of looked at roadsides versus creeks and trailside plot locations where they did this study. And so they kind of hypothesized that as yellow bluestem moves in through roadsides, it's going to slowly work its way out to other areas like a creekside or trailside. So this just kind of shows that it's really important if you're out recreating to think about cleaning off your vehicle or your boots or your clothing before you're going into a new area, because roadsides often are a huge vector for not just yellow bluestem, but non-native species in general. So just to talk a little bit about what I found here in Gila County, part of my position is I work with the Forest Service and local livestock ranchers to do long-term vegetation monitoring to make sure that grazing is sustainable throughout the county. And so I have approximately 350 long-term vegetation monitoring sites across the county. And at 6 of these sites, we've detected yellow bluestem, and at different time frames. And so these two with the red arrows and boxes have had the most significant increase in yellow bluestem across the years. So if you look at this first box on the left-hand side, yellow bluestem was first detected when monitoring began in 2011, and slowly in the 3 years that we've gone back and looked at this site, there's been a slow increase of yellow bluestem. Luckily, the native grasses, so these are 2 of our important native grasses for livestock and wildlife in general, you can see they're holding pretty steady. There's been a slight decrease in side oats and a slight decrease in blue grama. This could be due to drought. This could also be due to the encroachment. Further information needs to be looked at before I can really tie it back to saying we've seen this decrease because of yellow bluestem. Drought obviously is a huge factor right now for us, but yellow bluestem definitely wouldn't be helping. This site's pretty interesting, the one right below on Klein Mesa. So we detected yellow bluestem in 2012, but we really didn't see it start to increase until 2016. And then again, here's a comparison with some of our native species, and there has been a slight decrease in frequency. These other 4 sites where we've detected yellow bluestem, I've been there and I've pulled it while I was monitoring in most of these sites. And so we haven't, after I pulled it, I returned there and it wasn't detected again. Same with this site right here. This one has remained steady at about 3% frequency. And I believe when I was there, I also pulled those plans just to try and get a stop on those places it's spreading. So I know if you're a repeat listener to this webinar series, Chris has had some folks on that have talked about fire. So just one thing to think about is, so we have red brome, which is a non-native annual species that's been a driver of fires recently throughout Gila County. On an average year, red brome gets only about 6 inches. This last year when we got a lot of rain, it was probably up to my knees in a lot of areas across the forest that I visited. So a scary thought to me is you're adding this other non-native species that produces a lot more biomass. So you're gonna have the potential for a hotter fire that could even be moving faster, especially once it gets into those thick monocultures. And so to me, it's just concerning to think about our fire regime shifting, especially with climate change, and how variable drought has been throughout the year. So if you could imagine, you've got the added biomass the extra biomass too from the yellow bluestem. Then we've got a really dry year where there's all of this extra dry biomass that's just like kindling. It's ready to take off at any point. And so this native excuse me, this non-native grass really has a potential to further impact the fire regime that our native plants are used to. Other impacts to rangelands, if you are a rancher grazing on public or private land, yellow bluestem should definitely be a concern to you, or just because it doesn't provide enough adequate nutrition for livestock. So in areas where a monoculture is taking over, you could have decreased body condition or reproductive success if an animal is having to resort to just eating yellow bluestem because it's not as nutritious. I've visually actually never observed a plant being grazed when I've been out on the range with ranchers. I've even had folks tell me that they had their horses confined in a small holding pasture that was a monoculture of yellow bluestem, and their horse wouldn't even touch it. They ended up having to feed hay because they just were not interested in eating it. There are some studies out there that show that cattle or horses will graze yellow bluestem early in the growing season, but that's most likely just because that's the first thing that's greening up before some of our native species. As I mentioned earlier, it definitely tends to green up earlier in the growing season than most of our other species, so that would really be the only time that livestock would eat it. Later in the growing season, yellow bluestem is really known for accumulating a lot of dense, dead standing tissue that's just not palatable to anything that would be eating it. The other issue is that yellow bluestem and even our native bluestems in Arizona, their leaves and stalks are just much thicker than some of our other native species like our grama grasses. And so because they're high in lignin, even with, cows having 4 stomach compartments, they just don't have the gut biome set up to digest that extra lignin, which also adds to the fact that it's providing poor nutrition and it's just not adequate forage. And so in areas where people have tried to see if they could use grazing intensity as a means to control yellow bluestem, it just wasn't effective because cows will go out of their way to seek out those native species that are more palatable. So for control measures, if you see yellow bluestem on your property and you are interested in trying to control it, the most effective way seems to be a combination of either burning or mowing and then using herbicide. And in this case, the study, the cover was decreased to a greater amount if you did a combination of mowing, burning, and then some type of herbicide application multiple times throughout the growing season as compared to other treatments. And the same thing, so these are the frequency of live tiller crowns. So you would want to be reducing those live tiller crowns to reduce or to have a mortality effect on the species. So again, you can see if you're adding the mowing and burning plus multiple herbicide treatments, that seems to be your best bet. However, I understand that that's a very intensive control method. So a lot of people are not going to have the time or be able to put in the effort of multiple applications of herbicide, or taking the time to go out and mow, and burning, could be restricted depending on your land status. So pulling and digging up, bagging and removing from site is one of the easier methods. Again, that is kind of hard work to dig up the plant. I've done it myself, but because I don't want to see it, I don't want to see it spread. And when I'm working on Forest Service lands, obviously I can't be out there just applying herbicide willy-nilly. So, and as I mentioned before, they are huge seed spreaders. So if bagging and removing is possible, that's your best bet. Unfortunately, studies show that the seeds can remain viable within the soil for several years. So that's why trying to take some of those seeds off site could be critical. If you do want to go the route of just using herbicide, this is a list of some of the ones that have been showed to be effective. So this is the Amazopac is the active ingredient, and then this plateau would be the trade names or what you would see at the store. So again, glyphosate trade names, Roundup, Rodeo, etc. Just one thing to definitely point out is if you do decide to go the herbicide route on your property, just please be aware of regulations or restrictions in Arizona. If you're not sure, there are people that work at the Department of Agriculture that can give you, you know, information about the product that you're interested in using. Definitely read the entire product label. Where all of the recommended PPE or protection equipment that's listed on the label, and always follow mixing and application instructions. Overspraying or misuse of herbicides is how we end up with herbicide resistant weeds or plants, and the list of herbicide resistant things is growing. And so it's just really important to follow those mixing and application instructions. It can be really difficult to eradicate once established. Unfortunately, researchers are still looking into the best management practices, and restoration efforts following eradication are kind of an unknown as well due to those effects of soil that I mentioned earlier. I found one study in China where they were looking at restoration in a yellow bluestem area, but it wasn't very applicable to what we would be dealing with in native rangelands, because they were trying to do the restoration at a mine where there are heavy metals like arsenic within the soil. So that was contributing quite a bit to the restoration efforts. Other than that, I really couldn't find a lot of information about success with yellow bluestem, unfortunately. So hopefully within the coming years, as this becomes more on a radar, especially here in Arizona, maybe hopefully we'll be able to find some more information about this species and restoration efforts. Just to kind of switch gears now, I want to kind of go over some of the native grasses that look very similar to yellow bluestem. So if you are out and about on our lovely Arizona rangelands and you think you see yellow bluestem, hopefully this will kind of help you be able to ID it a little better. So this is our native Bothriochloa cane beard grass. And really the easiest way I could say to tell the two apart, especially if they're in seed, is that cane beard grass is just more white and fluffy. You can see compared to the yellow bluestem on the left that has more of the yellowish tinge. The other thing I would say is you can see in this other red circle, the actual panicle or the seed heads of the cane beardgrass don't ever kind of fully open up out of that stem. It's a little dark right here, but you can see this is right, I hope you can see my mouse, but this part is the stem. And so it's not quite opening up all the way, whereas the yellow bluestem does. Green spangletop could definitely be confused for yellow bluestem, especially you can see once the yellow bluestem is really opening up. The green spangletop sometimes will get that kind of purplish color too, especially later on in the growing season. The seeds can kind of change to that similar color. But if you kind of look closely at the seeds, there are no awns and there are no hairs on the green spangletop seed. So that would be kind of a definite giveaway. If you looked closely, those awns and hairs are visible to the naked eye on the yellow bluestem. So you would be able to, and they would be as well on the green spangletop because they are larger grasses. So that would just be one key thing or two key things that I would look at to ID the two of those. Little bluestem is also another native bluestem to our area. It does have awns and white hairs similar to the cane beard grass, but the inflorescence is arranged more of in a spike-like manner instead of that open panicle that I described earlier. So each of these is kind of coming off on its own little spike. And the stems of this plant, especially later in the growing season again, they tend to be more reddish in color, and same with cane beard grass than the yellow bluestem. It doesn't really turn, the vegetative parts don't turn red. They stay more of like a golden brown once they dry out. Plains lovegrass, it has kind of that purple color, so I could think people could maybe tend to confuse the two. But again, you could really look at the panicle. So on the plains lovegrass, it's going to be much more open. And then if you look closely at those seed heads, they're going to be much more smaller, delicate, and compact. Again, there's no awns or hairs associated with the plains lovegrass. And then Tobosa or Gaeta, they're not super common in Gila County. I see it pretty rarely, but that also is another species that kind of gets that purplish tinge, has some hairs and awns, but it's a single spike as opposed to an open panicle, and it does get taller to the same height as yellow bluestem. So they could easily be confused if you were kind of going off height. Okay, so what can you do? I used to work for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and part of my job was the invasive species coordinator for all of the Arizona refuges. So I spent a lot of time trying to do educational outreach to people that were going to be recreating on Fish and Wildlife Service refuges. And so one thing I like to stress to folks is just cleaning your equipment. So your boots, your clothing, if you're mountain biking, your vehicle, that could be your RV, a truck, a UTV, a fifth wheel, if possible, before recreating and even after recreating. That way you're doing your best to limit the spread of seeds that can get caught in your boots or your vehicle tires. A lot of people like to go out and do overnight horseback trips, either camping or hunting. If you are feeding your animal, definitely try to use certified weed-free hay, and just be aware of where you're buying your hay from. If you see plants, I would suggest consider recording the observation using SignNet. And so that first map that I show of the distribution, some of those were just observations through citizen science, and some of those were actual plant collections where they took it back and did an herbarium style collection of the plant. So just having more knowledge about the overall spread and location of invasive species can be helpful for land managers or people like myself that are concerned, or even citizen groups that do a lot of volunteering for weed management. So there's a whole list right there of folks that do not only trash pickups, but invasive species removal and restoration. So Southwest Vegetation Management Association, the Native Plant Society, Arizona Wilderness Society, Game and Fish. If you're in Gila County, there's Friends of the Tonto, your local Bureau of Land Management or Forest Service office. If you're interested in getting involved, those would be places to find a local working group. And just preventing invasive species in general, not just grasses. I don't know if any of you have heard of quagga mussel. That's an invasive mussel that's an issue along the Colorado River. So if you do have a boat and you're transporting it to another body of water, be sure to thoroughly clean and drain your boat. This may come as it may seem obvious, but you'd be surprised the amount of people that actually release aquarium fish and plants or live bait or other exotic animals into the wild. When I was working down outside of Yuma on the Colorado River, someone decided they didn't want their pet snakes anymore, and they released a breeding pair into the wild, into the lower Colorado River, and now there is a slow growing population of Nerodia, which is a non-native snake. People along the Colorado have seen Nile monitors that have been released, so just don't don't release any of that stuff if you don't want it anymore. Aquatic plants can become an issue if you're releasing them, just like upland plants or rangeland plants can become an issue. They also, non-natives have a way to invade waterways as well. And then I would just stress to help educate others about the threat of invasive species. Just, sharing some of these tips with people that you might be recreating with, or getting a small group of people together on your own, or encouraging your friends to kind of join some of these groups that do some of that citizen invasive species removal that sometimes federal agencies just can't get a hold of. And so that I guess I'll wrap it up and open it up to any questions. Here's my email. If you ever have a question about plant ID, I get a lot of text messages from friends and family or emails from colleagues of, hey, can you identify this plant for me? So if you ever have a question, a species in question on your property, or if you see somewhere out in a rangeland and you're concerned about it, or you want to know what it is, definitely feel free to shoot me an email. I'm used to it, and I don't mind helping people identify plants if they're interested. And with that, I guess I'll.
Thank you. Ashley, thank you. It's so good for us to learn about something like that and know a little bit of its history that's been around, but finally just kind of took off. And if we're able to do the rapid response, kind of know what it is, take it out before it has a chance to get established, that can be really effective.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because for Gila County folks, it's pretty prolific up in the Young area. That seems to be kind of the epicenter of where I'm seeing it right now. So if you're recreating in that area, I would highly recommend you trying to clean off your vehicle when you're coming to and from, just to prevent the spread throughout the county.
Right. So we're going to open up a little question and answer with Ashley at this time. I can see some coming in already. If you see in the chat box, I did enter the link for the webinar evaluation. So if you have a chance, just open that up. When we finish up here, or as you wish, just go ahead and respond to it. Usually takes less than a minute. So Jim Alusa.
Oh, I know Jim.
He wants to ask you, but why is it called Yellow Bluestem?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure, because throughout the literature and different resources that I used when I've been researching this species, some people refer to it as old world bluestem because it did come from Europe. Some people call it yellow bluestem, but I couldn't really find a reason as to why. So unfortunately, Jim, I'm not sure of the answer to that question.
Are others in that genus have that name, just to tie in with the genus?
Well, it's weird because cane beardgrass is the same genus, but we call that cane's beardgrass. Yeah. And then we do have yellow bluestem, which botanists love to flip flop back on the names based on genetics. So sometimes that has been a Bothriochloa and been in the same genus. I think right now it's technically not in the same genus. So there are other bluestems out there that do have different genus as well.
Okay, so just could be from, that's what it got called a long time ago, and we're still calling it that. It just seems like, and then you say botanists, we're switching it up all the time anyway. Yep. Kathleen Green is asking for copies of the slides.
Oh, yes.
And so if you want to make those available to me, everybody's got my email address, or we can just share our email addresses in the chat box, and we can share that with people. So, and I think that, yeah, great set of slides. And one thing that I really keyed in on that yellow bluestem is that distinct node is blue. And I don't know which other grasses might do that, but that you can, like you said, you just see it, and probably even without an inflorescence, you're going to see that. So that just seems like a good indicator.
Yeah, the native cane beardgrass does have, because it does get taller, it does have that node, but it doesn't get as swollen and have that distinctive brown color. So yeah, if you don't have the seeds to kind of do the comparison of the white and fluffy, then I would look for that node for sure.
Good. Okay, so tell you what, I'm going to bring up, if you don't mind, B. Durango, I'm going to allow you to talk and ask that question. So if you can unmute, and yeah, we're ready to go.
Hi. Hi, thank you. So I was just actually, Ashley, I'm so happy to meet you. I'm in your position now and for the strike team. And I'd seen
Oh, cool.
whenever, sorry, I don't even have my camera on. Where is that? Anyway, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Ashley. Anyway, I was just wondering, so we're working with the Yellow Bluestem more and more. It's actually around Buenos Aires on the roadsides, National Wildlife Refuge, and we've started working with folks to control it, but I've just seen it everywhere now. But anyway, I saw it up like at the top of Mount Lemon, up near Inspiration Point in the parking lot, kind of growing in that area. And I was surprised, and I don't know much about the species yet. And I was wondering if you could talk a little about the elevation range that it can fly and fly in.
So I did see 4,000 feet was the extent, but I think because it is, especially a newer species moving into Arizona, maybe here it does have the capacity to go above that 4,000 feet. That would be what my first thought on that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna talk to Forest Service people, I guess, because it's right in the parking lots and everything where everybody's recreating. And it's funny because you don't see it much on the roadside going up Mount Lemon, maybe because it's so totally infested with other species. But yeah, up there it seems to be doing pretty well, which was a surprise. So
yeah,
thanks.
that's sad to hear, because I was hoping that maybe elevation would be a limiting factor, especially since it is, kind of in those Sky Island areas down south of Tucson. But now I will go back and look and see if I can find any other information about it getting out of that 4,000 foot limit.
Okay, thank you. And I'll be in touch. I want to talk to you now.
Okay, great. Yeah, I look forward to it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good to meet you. I'm going to also just mention Patty is wondering how likely we are to see this in Coconino County. And, elevation's higher than 4,000. So just that discussion you just had is perhaps we can and will see it. So I think it's really important to know about it.
I mean, I'm pulling up my presentation again really quickly, and on SciNet there are so they're just visual observations that have been outside of Flagstaff. There's a few, so yeah, it's definitely going to move, I guess, above that 4,000 feet.
Okay, and Katie Landry does confirm that they've seen it near Flag. They do have it near Flag. Willie Sommers has a bit of a comment here. I want to bring you up here, Willie, if you don't mind. I bet you we know these people. So,
Hi, Willie.
Hey, Ashley. Yeah, no, great presentation, and really helpful with the identification. That's so important, especially when we call on volunteers. There's apps that people can use on their phones now, like iNaturalist, and they can record plant identifications in the field. So it's really good to make absolute certain that you're spotting a true noxious weed or invasive plant. I just wanted to point out that Yellow Bluestem has been added to the state of Arizona noxious weed list. That was updated late 2019 and then published January 2020. So it's a Class B noxious weed, which means that the definition is that it's known to occur in the state, but may be of limited distribution and a priority for control. Certainly your earlier slides show it's got a pretty wide distribution in Arizona, unfortunately, but just wanted to point out to folks that at the state level, it is recognized as a state listed noxious weed now, and that will help hopefully prioritize it as for need for control.
I hope so. Yeah. Like I said, I've been mentioning it to some of the Forest Service folks I work with here, just trying to hopefully bring it to their attention as well. And that's good to know that it's now on that list so that we can hopefully get a better reason to kind of attack it ahead of time.
You know, as you were describing it, it made me think of layman's love grass in the sense that it's able to kind of take over a piece of land and, you know, not really preferred as feed for cattle.
Right.
We've got kind of a small group here, so I can certainly bring people up for a little more discussion with Ashley. Go ahead.
So someone asked in the Q&A about the best place to find the statewide distribution of Yellow Bluestem. So John, I use SciNet quite a bit, but like Willie just mentioned, there are other things like iNaturalist. I can provide the link to SciNet for folks. That's kind of my go-to plant ID or just finding information on species, both native and non-native in Arizona. They usually have pretty good distribution maps. And if you're so inclined, you can make an account and log your observations on your own. So I have an account. I've shared photos of native and non-native species and GPS locations of where I've seen things. So you don't have to be someone in academia to share information through this through SciNet or Southwest Biodiversity. It's a really great website, and I think it's
Ashley,
a really.
would you mind sharing your screen? Maybe you can show us their website.
Sure.
That way we got time.
Yeah. I put the link in the chat box.
Okay.
For folks. Oh, it's not letting me, Chris.
You're
oh, here we go. Oh,
yeah, so you're still a co-host.
But I'm stuck on. Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. Can you see the Southwest by?
Right. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So you can do you can search different collections. You can do a map search. So if you're ever in an area and you're recreating, hiking, you can kind of draw a box and say, okay, well, I know I was in this area, and then you can search that area. You can also pare it down. So like if you think you know it's a grass or, oh, I made the box too big. But it'll give you kind of a list of species that you can expect in that area. There's different flora projects throughout Arizona. So for wildlife refuges, I was kind of working on this when I was there. But you can see there's lists for all kinds of different parks, wilderness areas throughout the state. So for Gila County folks, there is one in Tono National Forest, Saguaro Park. So you could pull up species lists to get information, and then just going from there, clicking on it, it'll give you, unfortunately, it weighs more on the botanical side as far as their description. So you might have to do some light Googling to figure out what some of these things mean. But a lot of times they have really great pictures. Also herbarium specimen mounts. And then if you're interested, here's the interactive map that'll show you, where that species is found. So this one's kind of only found here in Arizona and then down into Mexico, a little bit over into New Mexico. So like I said, I think this is just a pretty good website, excuse me, as far as a plants database goes for folks that are interested in plant ID or knowing about a species distribution.
I think it's great to get these little tips and the really useful websites, because if you aren't aware of them, you aren't. And so knowing where to go, and thank you for sharing that.
U of A also has this Yavapai County plants, and some of this overlaps with Gila County, but this is also a good spot to go. And then the USDA plants database is pretty decent. They don't have I use it every once in a while, but this database doesn't have as many of the really good pictures that SciNet and then this this Yavapai County page has. And this page actually pulls a lot of their photos from SciNet or master gardeners in Yavapai County that have taken pictures. So I can pop these links into the chat as well. Oops, I'm gonna stop sharing for folks that are interested.
We had Mary Barnes from Yavapai County Master Gardeners with us earlier, so just a shout out to her and Jeff's team up there. Thanks, thank you. What else do we have here down here in the chat box? So B. Durango mentions another great non-natives. At the Southwest checklist has a great non-natives list as well. And so thank you for sharing that. And, you know, if we're short on questions here, and this is what we can share about it, this has been great to learn. So
thank you for having me.
You bet. Well, we will just want to remind people one more time at the top there, I had the evaluation link. If you spend a little time filling that out for me, it helps me to document our program, say that it's evaluation based, and you know, we're responding to people. So all right, I'm going to pull up my closing slides here. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you.
We can see that there. Here's Ashley, our presenter. And I've been asking you all to do the survey, so thank you. We just had our Q&A. And just a little bit about what's coming up next on the Garden and Country webinar series. Next week is Thanksgiving holiday, so no webinar. Enjoy some time with your family virtually as necessary, and please take care of our dear ones who may be most susceptible to this COVID disease. So our next webinar is Thursday, December 3rd at 11 a.m. as always. The topic is creating pollinator habitats and conservation partnerships. We have Ann George, who's the senior scientist of biodiversity and sustainability of Freeport-McMoran Incorporated. So Globe Miami, our copper mines are very important for us. They put in a nice pollinator garden along Highway 60 next to their offices, and going to talk about that and the projects that they have. So for more upcoming webinars and recordings, go to our website, extension.arizona.edu/Gila. I do have the rest of the presentations posted through December, and I'll be planning for January. So with that, thank you for your time, and we will close it down here. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.